There's a footballer I don't particularly like. His name's Gary Lineker, right? So I've never liked him. He's had too good of legs for my liking. See as my legs are like one of Gandhi's, split in half and then sprayed ivory. Now, he shared a video on Instagram that caters, this is speech marks, this is what it said, I don't know who said it, but it's here, caters to Jew haters. That even sounds awful, doesn't it? So this Instagram post was from a group, Palestine Lobby, with the title Zionism Explained in 2 Minutes, and featured an illustration of a rat. Now, a rat. So he shared this video with 1.2 million followers. He's got 1.2 million crisp eating, big ear hole, brown leg, gold hanging followers. Now, the rat, well, that's always been used as an anti-Semitic insult, referring to the old Nazi Germany. We always say that we were fighting the Nazis. We're fighting fucking Germans. So the Germans used to characterize Jews, the non-German Jews, of course, as pests, subhuman, and disease. So he reckons he didn't know what the rat symbolized. Funny that. But there again, on the other hand, he claimed to be a bloody expert on the Third Reich when he was accusing the Tories of behaving like 1930s Germany. He was gobbing off and knew all about it, but he didn't know what the fucking rat was. Isn't that funny?
In a bombshell announcement that sends shockwaves across both the sporting and media landscapes, Gary Lineker has confirmed he will not return to front the BC's 2026 World Cup coverage, following a fiery and divisive row over accusations of anti-Semitism. This is not just the end of an era in British broadcasting. It's a glaring symbol of the political minefield that now engulfs the UK's publicly funded media. For decades, Lineker was the BBC's golden boy, polished, witty, and safe, or so it seemed. His stewardship of Match of the Day was legendary. His presence at World Cups, a fixture as reliable as the tournament itself. But over the last few years, Lineker increasingly drew the ire of the political right for his vocal support of refugees, his criticism of conservative immigration policy, and his blunt takes on racism and nationalism. This incident doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's part of a larger pattern. The weaponization of culture and speech by those eager to frame media as a battleground for ideological war. The BB, already under siege from Tory MPs for being too woke, is caught between two fires. On one side, it faces growing pressure from the government and conservative donors to clamp down on presenters who veer into political territory. On the other, it risks alienating viewers and journalists who see the broadcaster's integrity in its independence and moral clarity. This isn't just about Lineker. It's about what happens when politics permeates every corner of public life. Even football, once a common ground, the national sport is now increasingly used as a proxy for larger political wars. Immigration, nationalism, race, and freedom of expression. Lineker's stance on human rights, notably during the Qatar World Cup, sparked outrage from those who believe sports should remain apolitical. A belief many find naive or selectively applied. His critics, who have long branded him a champagne socialist and a virtue signaler, are now celebrating what they see as a long overdue consequence. But the cheers may be premature. Because if even someone as moderate, measured, and widely respected as Gary Lineker can be pushed out, what message does that send to younger journalists, athletes, or public figures who dare to speak up? The BBC now faces a credibility crisis. For viewers, Lineker's exit is not just about football. It's about trust. And for the political class, it's a reminder that attempts to muzzle dissent rarely go unnoticed. Already, questions are mounting about the influence of external lobbying groups on editorial decisions. Was the BBC pressured to act by MPs? Were donors involved? And most importantly, who's next? In his understated yet firm farewell, Lineker made it clear that he's not done speaking up, just done doing it from behind the BC logo. Whether that's a sign of a man staying true to his principles or a public broadcaster losing grip of its own remains to be seen.
Why do we need an EU reset? And what does that actually mean? Let me guess. Freedom of movement disguised as a youth mobility scheme for the 18 to 34s, despite assurances to the contrary.
It isn't freedom of movement. We have 13 existing youth mobility schemes. We've got a youth mobility scheme with Uruguay, for example. Nobody suggests we've got freedom of movement with Uruguay. I've said it has to be smart. It has to be controlled. That absolutely isn't freedom of movement. And it will also give, by the way, opportunities for young people here in Britain to experience different cultures, to go abroad to work, to go abroad for study. But that is just one aspect, Camilla. What we will be looking at today in these final hours is this deal overall in the national interest, overall in the interests of the British people, and we will only sign it if it does.
I mean, are you still a youth at 34? And who's going to monitor all that? The Home Office are so bad, they don't even know who's coming across the channel via dinghy. Britain is breaking under the strain. They want to continue fishing in our waters, and as our closest neighbours, if they don't buy the fish we catch, I get it that in some way we may well be scuppered, but we sell mainly to them. But there must be other ways of doing things. And of course, the EU want closer ties in defence. Sounds like a good idea, but the devil is in the detail. And a defence pact will serve to further align us to the EU with potentially even closer links to the European Court of Justice. In my view, the EU is a failing bloc of countries and a failing construct. It's hard enough getting 4 friends to agree on something, let alone 27 countries each with their own vested interests, each with the power of veto. It takes an age to get anything done. And remember Brexit? How could we forget? The EU behaved like a spurned lover. Why would we want to get back together? By all means be civil and friendly, but it's not as though we've had a child together. It's just wise to get along for the sake of humanity. We don't need to hold hands, but a reset. What exactly are we resetting? I've lost count of the number of times Remainers have said to me, see, you exchange people from the EU for people from India and Africa, as if people from India and Africa are worse. What is their point? They're also wrong, because the truth is we never counted the number of people who came to the UK under freedom of movement, so there is actually no real comparison of numbers. Plus, the huge influx of legal migration has been caused by the incompetence of our politicians, and in particular the Tories, who allowed mass migration under their watch to quadruple over 4 years. They have failed us. Instead of ensuring that we had people that we need from wherever, who cares, entering this country, the Tories pretty much took everyone and their dog without balancing it off with the needs of our great country. The system was and still is way too generous. Why does my mum and dad need to come here if I am studying? It's ludicrous. What other country allows that? Here's what I think. Sir Keir Starmer loves the European Union and will literally open the floodgates to do a deal with them for very little in return. Britain will become the dumping ground, if it isn't already, for failed asylum seekers, and rather than closer alignment being good for our borders, will result in us losing total control of them altogether. We don't need more migration, we need less. That is why Britain is breaking.
As Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer intensifies his diplomatic charm offensive toward Brussels, a new fault line is emerging in Britain's already fraught immigration debate. Will realigning closer to the European Union come at the cost of border security? Conservative voices, and increasingly concerned moderates, are sounding the alarm that Starmer's efforts to reset the UK-EU relationship could reopen doors Britain slammed shut during Brexit. Among the most pressing fears, that Britain could once again be bound to European asylum mechanisms, turning the UK into a soft-touch destination for migrants and a fallback option for EU states looking to offload responsibility. Critics argue that Starmer's ambiguity is the danger. He insists there will be no return to the single market, no return to freedom of movement, yet in the same breath pledges to strike pragmatic, cooperative deals with the EU on everything from trade to migration. The problem? Migration isn't a pick-and-choose issue in Brussels. If Britain wants in on joint security operations or cross-border policing, many fear the EU will demand renewed participation in burden, sharing of asylum seekers, The UK's departure from the EU was driven in large part by the British public's desire to regain control over immigration. Any perception that Labour is undermining that victory risks political backlash. Already, EU nations like France and Germany are facing internal crises over asylum backlogs. If Starmer's government offers even a hint of openness to European migrant relocation plans, Britain could find itself back in the asylum lottery it fought so hard to escape. Keir Starmer has long tried to project himself as a leader of quiet competence, a break from the chaos of the Johnson years. But on migration, silence may not be enough. With border crossings on the rise and public trust in immigration policy at historic lows, his next steps could define not just his credibility, but Labour's future in power. If the public senses he is inching Britain back into the EU's asylum orbit, without their consent, it could reignite the very Brexit era divisions Labour has tried to bury.